Elevate your home with Paris Rhone, where style meets function in perfect harmony. Discover their curated collection of premium home appliances and accessories, from sleek kitchen gadgets to innovative living room solutions. Paris Rhone brings a touch of Parisian elegance to your everyday life. Ready to transform your space? For a limited time, enjoy up to 20% off your first order with promo code DARK. Visit parisrhone.com today and elevate your home the Parisian way. Welcome to Dark Crossroads Podcast, hosted by Roxanne Fletcher. This is your stop for all things true crime and paranormal. From the infamous story of the New Bedford Highway Killer to the chilling tale of the Black-Eyed Children, Dark Crossroads Podcast is a truly deep dive into the stories that frighten and fascinate you. All links to the show will be provided in this episode's description. And don't forget to let us know what you think of today's episode. Imagine you're deep in the woods, miles from anywhere. It's winter, the kind of cold that gets into your bones, and it stays there. And you hear it. Not footsteps, exactly. More like something dragging itself through the snow. Slow, patient, like it has all the time in the world. And then you smell it. Rot, decay, something that shouldn't be alive, but is. This isn't just a campfire story. This is a legend so feared that entire communities built laws around it. So real to people who believed in it that men have been killed, legally executed for turning into one. So let's get into it. So first off, let's talk about where this thing actually comes from, because a lot of pop culture has completely mangled it. The Wendigo legend originates with the Algonquin-speaking people. These are tribes across the northern United States and Canada in that brutal forest region. And here's what got me when I was researching this one. The Wendigo isn't just a monster. It's a warning, a moral lesson wrapped in nightmare fuel. The core legend goes like this. A person, usually during a famine or maybe a brutal winter when starvation is slowly closing in, resorts to cannibalism to survive. And the moment they taste human flesh, something happens. They don't just become a murderer, they become cursed. Their body will twist and warp into something inhuman, gaunt, skeletal, sometimes being larger than normal humans, with sunken eyes, grayish decaying skin, stretched over bone, and this insatiable growing hunger that can never, ever be satisfied. And that is the part that gets me every time. The more it eats, the hungrier it gets. It grows larger with every victim. It can never be full. Ever. Think about that as a metaphor for a second, because I don't think that's an accident. This legend comes out of communities that lived through real famine, real winters where starvation was a genuine threat, where the temptation and the horror of cannibalism was not some abstract concept. The Wendigo represents greed, excess, selfishness taken past every human limit. It's what happens when you take more than your share, and it is never enough. Descriptions vary a lot, depending on the nation and the storyteller. But there are some threads that show up again and again. emaciated, like famine given a body. Some accounts describe it as ash gray or yellowish skin, pulled tight over a skeleton, lips torn away or gone entirely, exposing the teeth, long, sharpened claws, and this particular smell. This is in almost every account, the smell of decay and death that precedes it into a room or a clearing. Some versions give it antlers, or a deer or a moose skull for a head, which is where a lot of modern horror media pulled that iconic image from. Other tellings describe it as more human-shaped but grotesquely tall, sometimes 20 feet or more. And it's fast. That's something that comes up constantly. Despite the emaciated, broken-looking body, it moves at inhuman speed through the trees. There's also something called Wendigo psychosis. This is a documented, if controversial, cultural-bound syndrome that anthropologists recorded historically, where a person would develop an intense craving for human flesh, whether that is a genuine psychiatric phenomenon or something shaped by the storytelling and belief systems around it is still debated. But it tells you how seriously this legend was taken. This wasn't ghost story around the campfire serious. This was law and punishment seriousness. And that brings me to a case that I think is the most chilling piece of this whole legend because it is not folklore. It is documented history. In 1878, Canadian territory near what's now Alberta, a man named Swift Runner, a Cree trapper, walked out of the wilderness alone. His entire family, his wife, his 6 children, his brother, were gone. He told the Hudson's Bay Company his family had starved to death over the winter, but something just didn't sit right. The investigators followed him back to his camp. What they found was the remains of his entire family, and evidence that he had killed and eaten them. And here's the detail that still gets me. There was food there. There was a trading post relatively nearby. He was not more than a couple days' journey from help and supplies. He wasn't starving. He didn't need to do what he did. Swift Runner later confessed, and according to accounts, he described being overtaken by an overwhelming compulsion. He believed and told others that he had been possessed. He had confessed that he turned into a Wendigo. He was tried and executed by hanging in 1879, one of the last public executions in that region of Canada. Now, I want to be really honest with you here because this is where the legend and the tragedy get tangled together in a way that I think we have to sit with. What likely happened to Swift Runner was almost certainly a severe psychiatric break, possibly compounded by isolation, grief, and genuine trauma. But the framework his entire community had for understanding what happened to him, the only language available, was Wendigo. That's what makes this case so haunting to me. It's not really a monster story. It's a story about how a culture explains the unexplainable horror of what a human being is capable of. Swift Runner's case is the one people usually bring up first. But there's another figure in this history that I think is just as important and way less talked about. A man named Jack Fiddler. Jack Fiddler was a chief and a medicine man up in northern Ontario, and here's the thing. He wasn't accused of becoming a Wendigo. He was known within his community as a Wendigo hunter, someone whose job, spiritually, socially, was to identify when a person had become possessed by the Wendigo spirit, or was so far gone into that state of starvation madness that they were a genuine danger to everyone around them, and to end that threat before it spread. By his own account, over the course of his life, Fiddler killed at least 14 people he and his community believed had turned or were going to turn into a Wendigo. So rewind, let's sit with that for a second because I think it's really easy to hear that number and immediately jump to judgment. But I want you to think about the world he was operating in. It was remote, isolated, winters that could and did kill entire families. In that context, his role wasn't seen as murder. It was seen as protection, the same as a doctor cutting out something infected before it spreads to the rest of the body. In 1907, Canadian authorities arrested Jack Fiddler and his brother Joseph for the killing of a young woman in their community. A woman who, by their account, had become violently possessed and was going to kill others if she was not stopped. Jack Fiddler died before his trial concluded. Some accounts say that he took his own life rather than remain imprisoned. Unable to accept being taken from his land and his role, Joseph Fiddler, his brother, was convicted but eventually was pardoned. What gets me about this case is that it flips the entire lens. Swift Runner's story asks, what does starvation and isolation turn a person into? Jack Fiddler's story asks something different. What does a community do when it genuinely believes that transformation is happening in front of them? What responsibility does someone take on when they believe they're the only thing standing between a monster and the people that they love? Two men, two totally different roles in this legend, and both of them ended up destroyed by it. Now let's fast forward, because the Wendigo hasn't just stayed in the 1800s. People are still reporting encounters. Hikers, hunters, people who live along the edges of these same forests in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Ontario, Quebec. A common thread in a lot of the modern accounts I dug through, people out hunting or camping alone report hearing something, walking upright through the brush where nothing should be walking upright. Not on four legs. They hear it on two, deliberately, slowly, like it's stalking them, not hunting them the way an animal would. Others describe a feeling before they see or hear anything at all, this overwhelming, bone-deep sense of being watched, paired with a drop in temperature that doesn't match the weather. A wrongness in the air is how more than one account puts it. And then there's this sound. Multiple reports, completely independent of each other, different states, different decades, describe a high-pitched shrieking or whistling call. Something followed by what people describe as their own name being called back to them, in a voice that sounds almost human. Almost. And that one detail right there is one that keeps me up at night, if I'm being honest with you. Because it's not, I saw a monster and ran. It's, something out there knew my name. That's a different kind of fear. That's the kind of fear that gets into your chest, and it sits there. There are also accounts from hunters of finding massive, oddly proportioned tracks, too long for a bear, spaced too far apart for a human stride, sometimes alternating between what looks like clawed feet and something closer to hooves. Camps found torn apart with food supplies, untouched, but everything else destroyed. Like whatever did it wasn't looking for food at all. It was looking for something else. So let's talk theories for a second, because I always like to give you the full spread. The skeptical explanation is straightforward. Malnourishment-driven psychosis explains historical cases like Swift Runner. Misidentified wildlife, bears standing upright, moose at odd angles in a low light, explains a lot of modern sightings. But isolation plus fear does the rest. Cold, dark, silence. Your brain fills in the gaps, and it doesn't fill them in with anything comforting. And then there's the folklore, as literal truth camp, which argues that a legend this consistent across this many independent communities over this many centuries, describing eerily similar physical traits and behaviors, that's not nothing. That's either an extraordinary durable piece of oral tradition, or it is describing something that was actually being encountered. And then there is a middle theory I find genuinely fascinating, that the Wendigo isn't a creature at all, but something closer to what some traditions describe as a spirit or a state of being that can inhabit or transform a person, which is a very different kind of horror than there's a monster in the woods. That's a horror that says the monster could be any of us, under the wrong conditions. I'll be honest, that last one is the version that unsettles me the most, not because I think there's a literal antlered creature stalking the tree line, but because the entire point of this legend was never really about the monster. It was about what hunger, desperation, and isolation can turn a person into. And that's not folklore, that's just truth. Okay, so before we close this episode out, I want to share a few stories that came from you guys, the Dark Crossroads community. I asked a while back if anyone had their own Wendigo encounter or stories passed down in their family. And honestly, I was not prepared for how many of you wrote in. So let's get into a few of them. The first one comes from a listener in northern Minnesota. She wrote in and said her grandfather used to tell her not to whistle in the woods at night because it would whistle back, and by the time you realized the second whistle wasn't an echo, it was already too late. She said that she would brush this off as just an old superstition, until she was deer hunting with her uncle about 10 years ago, alone in a stand near dusk, and heard a long, high whistle from somewhere off to her left. She whistled back without thinking, it was just instinct, and says that she heard it answer, closer. She didn't wait to find out what was making it. That don't answer it detail shows up constantly in the mail that I get for this show, by the way. Different states, different families, same rule. Don't repeat what you hear, don't call back. There's something almost universal about that instinct. Like every culture that's ever lived close to the true wilderness independently arrived at the same warning. The second story is from a listener in Ontario. He was camping with two friends near a lake, and one night their food supplies, which were properly stored, were completely destroyed. Not eaten, they were destroyed. Torn open, scattered, some of it flung up into the trees, but nothing was actually consumed. He said what stuck with him wasn't the mess. It was that all three of them independently described the same feeling that night before it happened. It was like a pressure feeling, like the air had gone thin, and a smell that reminded one of them of a flooded basement. It was a wet, raw smell. And the last one that I will share tonight, this one honestly gave me chills when I read it. A listener from Quebec said her family has a story about her great-great-uncle, a trapper, who went missing for 11 days in the dead of winter and was found alive, which almost never happened back then. When he came back, he wouldn't eat meat for the rest of his life. Wouldn't explain why. The only thing he ever said about those 11 days to anybody was that it walked beside him the whole way home and never once got close enough to touch him, but never once would leave him alone. This one is not about a monster attacking. That's something almost patient, watching, choosing not to do anything. And I don't know what's scarier, the version of this legend where it hunts you, or the version where it just walks beside you the whole way home and lets you leave. A listener from northern Michigan wrote in about her father, who worked seasonal logging jobs up near the Canadian border back in the 80s. She said he wasn't a superstitious man. He was practical, quiet, not the type to make things up for any attention. But there was one winter he came home early from a job and never went back to that particular stretch of woods again for the rest of his career. He told her the crew had a rule out there, one that got passed down from the older loggers to the newer ones without much explanation. If you hear something walking near camp at night that sounds heavier than it should, you do not shine a light on it, you let it pass. Her father broke that rule exactly once, out of curiosity more than fear. He said what he saw in that half second of light did not look like an animal, and it didn't look fully like a person either. And that the worst part wasn't the shape of it, it was that it stopped moving the second the light hit it, like it had been waiting to be looked at. He never described it beyond that point, not to her, not to anybody, and as far as she knows, he just packed up his gear a few days later and left. I think that's part of what makes this legend so effective, honestly. It's not really built around jump scares or gore. It's built around waiting, watching, something patient enough to let you almost forget it's there. So here is where I always like to land on episodes like this one, because I don't think the value of the Wendigo legend is really about whether you believe there is a literal antlered creature stalking the tree line in Ontario. I think that the value is in what the legend has survived long enough to keep teaching. This is a story that has outlasted the specific famines that likely birthed this legend. It's outlasted the fur trade era, outlasted the court cases. It outlasted 100 years of retellings that turned it into video game monsters and horror movie mascots. And underneath all of that, the core of it hasn't really changed. A warning about what happens when hunger, in whatever form it takes, is allowed to go unchecked. Greed, selfishness, taking more than your share again and again, until there's no version of you left that remembers what enough even looks like. And maybe that is why it still gets told around fires and logging camps and emails from people like you sending me your family stories. Because on some level, we all understand exactly what it is describing. We've all met that human version of that hunger, even if we've never met the thing in the woods. So the next time you're out there, and that pressure in the air changes, and that feeling creeps in that you are not as alone as you thought you were, don't answer if it calls back. Next time you're in the woods, especially somewhere remote, especially in the wintertime, and you feel that drop in temp that doesn't make sense, or you hear something moving that sounds just a little too deliberate, just a little too upright, trust that feeling. Don't wait to find out what's causing it. And if you've ever had your own account, or you grew up with these stories in your family or community, I want to hear about it. Send it my way, because you know I'll dig into it. Until next time, stay safe out there, and stay curious. Alrighty, so it's that time, guys, to say goodbye. But before I do so, I just want to send a thank you to all of my listeners for your continued love and support, and for sending in cases that you want covered and stories that you want read on the podcast. We truly accept all stories, including scary, paranormal, and funny. Any cases you want covered or stories that you want read on the podcast, just please send them in to darkcrossroadspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for hanging out again today. You can also find us on all social media platforms. Don't forget to like, share, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening to us. You can subscribe to the podcast for bonus information. There is a link in all episodes in the notes that will send you to our subscription page, and with that you will get bonus content, discount on future merch, and a lot of extra goodies. And with all of this said, please don't forget to be weird, stay different, and don't trust anyone. Are you tired of juggling multiple AI platforms? We'll say hello to Babbly, your gateway to the world's premium AI models all in one place. At Babbly, they have revolutionized AI access. Imagine having ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and Claude at your fingertips, seamlessly integrated into one user-friendly platform. That is the power of Babbly. Whether you are a developer, researcher, or just an AI enthusiast, Babbly offers streamlined access to top-tier AI models, a unified, hassle-free experience, and cutting-edge technology with unparalleled simplicity. No more switching between apps or juggling subscriptions. With Babbly, you get the best of AI all in one place. Are you ready to simplify your AI journey? For our listeners today, we have a very exclusive offer. Using promo code DARK10, all lowercase, when you sign up for Babbly, you will get 10% off your first month with Babbly. Don't let complexity hold you back. Join the AI revolution with Babbly today. Visit babbly.com and use code DARK10 for 10% off your first month. Join the crowd at Babbly, simply unlocking AI's potential.